I used to believe that time healed everything, that if you waited long enough the ache would dull, the sharp edges would smooth, and the silence would eventually break with the words you deserved to hear. I was 40 when I decided I would wait for an apology. I am 70 now, sitting in the same little house in Ohio where the paint has faded and the porch boards creak like old knees, and I can finally admit that the apology never came. My name is Margaret Hale. Most people call me Maggie. If you walked past my house, you wouldn't see anything remarkable: white siding, a sagging mailbox, wind chimes that only sing when the wind remembers to visit. Inside, there are photographs on the walls that tell a story of birthdays and graduations, Christmas mornings and summer cookouts. What they don't show is the empty chair at Thanksgiving for 3 decades. They don't show the way I used to pause whenever the phone rang, the way my heart would leap and then drop when it was just a telemarketer or a wrong number. They don't show the letter I kept in the kitchen drawer, yellowed and unfolded so many times, the creases nearly tore through the paper. 30 years ago, my younger sister Evelyn walked out of my life. She didn't slam the door, she didn't shout. She simply left after saying words that would echo in my mind for decades. "You think you're always right, Maggie. You never listen." We had grown up in a small Midwestern town in the 60s and 70s, daughters of a factory worker and a school secretary. Dad smelled of engine oil and tobacco. Mom smelled of lavender and starch. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Evelyn was 4 years younger than me, all freckles and big brown eyes. She used to trail behind me everywhere, clutching the hem of my shirt like I was her compass. I was the responsible one, the straight-A student, the one who made dinner when Mom worked late and helped Evelyn with her homework. I wore responsibility like a badge of honor. I thought being the oldest meant knowing better. I didn't realize it also meant learning how to bend. When we were teenagers, our differences began to sharpen. I wanted stability, college, a teaching job, a tidy house with curtains that matched the couch. Evelyn wanted to see the world. She painted in her room late at night, listening to music that rattled the windows. She talked about New York, about galleries and poetry readings, about a life that didn't revolve around a 9 to 5. "You're going to get hurt," I used to tell her. "Maybe," she'd say, smiling in that reckless way. "But at least it'll be my hurt." I thought I was protecting her. She thought I was judging her. Maybe we were both right. I married Tom at 23. He was steady, the kind of man who fixed things without being asked. We bought this house 2 years later. Evelyn came to the wedding in a thrift store dress she'd altered herself, looking like she belonged on the cover of a magazine. She hugged me tight before the ceremony and whispered, "Don't forget to dream, okay?" I laughed it off. I didn't know then how those words would haunt me. Evelyn moved to Chicago in her mid-20s. She rented a tiny apartment and worked odd jobs while chasing her art. Mom worried constantly. Dad pretended not to. I called her every Sunday at first, asking about money, about boyfriends, about whether she was being careful. She would answer, but I could hear the distance growing. Then came the night everything cracked. It was Thanksgiving. The house was full, turkey in the oven, cranberry sauce on the counter, football humming from the living room. Evelyn had driven in the night before. She looked thinner, tired, but her eyes still held that fire. After dinner, she told us she'd been offered a chance to move to Los Angeles with a group of artists she'd met. It wasn't a stable job. It was more like a leap into fog. Mom started crying softly. Dad stared at his plate. I felt the old familiar panic rise in my chest. "Evelyn, this is ridiculous," I said. "You're almost 30. When are you going to grow up?" The room went quiet. "I am grown up," she said, her voice steady but shaking underneath. "Just because I don't want your life doesn't mean I don't have one." "That's not what I meant," I replied, but I could hear the condescension in my own tone. "You always think you know what's best for me." She said, "You don't even ask what I want." "I'm your sister," I shot back. "It's my job to tell you the truth." "No," she said, tears filling her eyes. "It's your job to love me, even when I choose differently." I could have softened then. I could have walked across the room and hugged her. I could have said, "I'm scared for you. Not ashamed of you, but pride is a stubborn thing." "If you go," I said, "don't expect me to pick up the pieces." She looked at me as if I'd slapped her. "I never asked you to," she whispered. She left the next morning before sunrise. No goodbye hug, no note, just an empty bed and a silence that settled into the house like dust. For the first few weeks, I expected her to call. I rehearsed what I would say. "I'm sorry I raised my voice. I'm sorry I made it sound like I don't believe in you." But I also expected something else, her apology. I wanted her to admit I was right to worry. Right to question, right to be the responsible one. Months passed, then a year. Mom tried to keep in touch, sending letters that came back marked, moved. Dad died of a heart attack 3 years later. Evelyn wasn't at the funeral. That was the moment something hardened in me. How could she? I remember saying to Tom that night, standing at the kitchen sink. How could she not come home for Dad? Tom put his hand on my shoulder. Maybe she's ashamed, he said gently. She should be, I snapped. But beneath my anger was a quieter truth. I was ashamed too. Ashamed that our last conversation had been a battle. Ashamed that I'd let pride speak louder than love. Years went by. I had 2 children, Sarah and Michael. I poured myself into motherhood the way some people pour themselves into religion. I made sure my kids knew they could tell me anything. I told myself I was breaking a cycle of silence, but part of me was overcorrecting, trying to prove to the universe that I could listen. Every Christmas, I set an extra place at the table for the first 5 years. After that, I stopped. It hurt too much. I kept waiting for an apology. I imagined it so many times that it began to feel real. The phone would ring, I'd answer, and there she'd be, older, softer, saying, Maggie, I'm sorry I left like that. I'm sorry I didn't come to Dad's funeral. I was scared, I was stubborn. And I would reply, I'm sorry too. But the phone never rang with her voice on the other end. Instead, life kept moving. Sarah grew up and moved to Seattle. Michael joined the Navy. Tom retired from the hardware store and took up gardening. The years layered themselves over my anger like coats of paint. But underneath, the original color remained. When I turned 60, Tom gave me a small wooden box. Inside were letters Evelyn had sent to my parents over the years. Letters Mom had kept hidden from me. I sat at the dining room table, hands trembling, and read words written in my sister's looping handwriting. She had moved to Los Angeles. She had struggled. She had fallen in love with a photographer named Daniel. She had held art shows in small cafes. She had written about missing home, about dreaming of cornfields and cicadas. And in one letter, dated 15 years earlier, she wrote, I don't know how to talk to Maggie. I feel like she'll just say, told you so. I don't think I could survive that. The paper blurred as tears filled my eyes. I had been waiting for her apology, but she had been waiting for my understanding. Tom sat across from me, quiet as always. Why didn't Mom tell me? I asked. She thought you'd reach out when you were ready, he said. I wasn't ready. Not then. I folded the letters back into the box and told myself it was too late anyway. 2 years later, Mom passed away. In her final days, she held my hand and said, call your sister. I don't know how, I admitted. Just start, she whispered. After the funeral, I found an address in Mom's old address book. A P.O. box in Santa Monica. I wrote a letter. It was stiff, formal, full of updates about the kids and the weather. I didn't mention Thanksgiving. I didn't say I was sorry. Weeks passed, no response. I told myself that was it. I had tried. But deep down, I knew I hadn't really tried. I had reached out without opening up. I had extended a hand while keeping my heart tucked safely behind my ribs. When Tom died at 68, the house grew unbearably quiet. Grief does strange things. It strips you down to the truth you've been avoiding. On the 3rd night after the funeral, I sat on the edge of our bed and whispered into the dark, I'm tired of being right. It was the first time I admitted that maybe I didn't need an apology as much as I needed peace. I found the wooden box again and reread every letter. I noticed things I hadn't before. The way Evelyn always asked about me, even when she was afraid of my judgment. The way she described her failures honestly, without excuses. The way she never once blamed me, even when she could have. I wrote another letter. This one was different. I told her I was scared that Thanksgiving night. I told her I was jealous of her courage. I told her I had confused control with love. I wrote, I've spent 30 years waiting for you to say sorry. And I realize now I should have been the one to say it first. I mailed it the next morning. 2 months passed, then 3. I checked the mailbox every day like a child waiting for a college acceptance letter. Nothing came. Last winter, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. My heart thudded as I answered. Is this Margaret Hale? A woman asked. Yes. My name is Laura Martinez. I'm calling from St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. I'm sorry to inform you that your sister, Evelyn Carter, passed away last week. The world went silent. She listed you as her next of kin. The woman continued gently. We found your recent letter among her belongings. I don't remember much after that. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor, the cold seeping through my sweater. I remember thinking she read it. At least she read it. I flew to California for the memorial. It was small, artists, neighbors. A man with kind eyes who introduced himself as Daniel. He told me they had been together for 25 years. She talked about you, he said. Good things, I asked, my voice barely audible. She said you were the strongest person she knew. She always hoped you'd come visit. I swallowed hard. I was waiting for her to say sorry. He looked at me gently. She thought you were waiting for her to succeed. That night, I stood on a beach I had only ever seen in photographs. The ocean roared in and out, relentless and forgiving all at once. I held a small urn in my hands and whispered, I'm sorry, Evie. I'm sorry I waited. The apology I had waited for 30 years never came, but neither did the one she might have been waiting for. I came home to Ohio with a lighter suitcase and a heavier heart. I placed a photograph of Evelyn on the mantel beside Tom's. In it, she is laughing, hair wild in the California wind. I still live in this house. I still hear the wind chimes, but I don't wait for the phone to ring anymore. Sometimes my grandchildren ask about the woman in the picture. That's my sister, I tell them. She was brave. And when they fight with each other over toys or pride, I kneel down and say, don't wait too long to say you're sorry. Sometimes tomorrow doesn't come. I waited 30 years for an apology that never came. And in that waiting, I built a wall so high I couldn't see my own reflection in it. I thought I was protecting myself from hurt, but I was only protecting my pride. And pride is a lonely companion in old age. If I could go back to that Thanksgiving night, I would cross the room, take my sister's face in my hands, and tell her that love matters more than being right. That fear can disguise itself as wisdom. That family is too fragile to gamble on silence. But life doesn't offer rewrites, only lessons, and mine came late and heavy, so now. At 70, I tell my story not because the apology arrived, but because forgiveness did, and though it came without the words I once demanded, it brought a quiet peace that finally taught me this. Sometimes the healing isn't in hearing I'm sorry, but in having the courage to say it first, even if the only one left to hear it is the echo of your own heart.